Good evening, Senators. We are back from recess. On the main motion, I will consider at this time to speak on the main motion. Senator Will Castro, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As I brought up to you earlier, I do yield the balance of my time to Senator Therese Salahi. However, I would like it noted for the record that my concerns, as well as my recommendations, were submitted to Senator Rigel in writing, and I asked that it be appended to the committee report, and the good senator and chairman of the committee has agreed to that. So thank you, Madam Speaker.
Cito Esmasi, Senator Castro. Senator Therese Salahi, you're recognized on the main motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Senator from Barragata. Madam Speaker, I have 3 amendments that have been passed out, and I'd like to do those real quickly and then just to make some general comments on the bill. So the first amendment is to require a baseline data study. So the American Journal of Public Health published an article regarding the public health framework of legalized marijuana in Colorado. It noted that—
Senator Salahi, I do apologize. You said you had several amendments on the First Amendment. Before you speak, could you just please read it where we are going to put it, or?
Yes.
And
so
what the title?
The amendment, Madam Speaker, is on line 15, page 19.
Thank you.
And it's titled Baseline Data Study Prior to Enact. The word says legalization, but the 2 references to legalization are going to be changed to enactment.
Okay, I'll work on that first motion to change the word from legalization to enactment. Are there any objections? No objection. Motion carries. Thank you, Senator Talayi. Please
Thank you,
proceed.
Madam Speaker. Okay, so this new section describes a study that is going to be required, and it says that the Cannabis Control Board, the Office of the Governor, in collaboration with the other departments, are going to do this. This is to get that baseline data. And so it's from this, it's Colorado where I'm getting this, and they note that annual or biannual data collection will allow the departments to establish baseline data for the prevalence of marijuana use and to monitor changes in use patterns over time. Monitoring these patterns will allow the state to better focus prevention efforts on populations at the highest risk for adverse effects stemming from marijuana use. The department plans to add questions in future surveys to further I'll skip that part. But this data is similar to the data that had already been required by a prior amendment, but this is to get the baseline. So it's in that 1 year where we are waiting for the rules to be enacted, that we are hoping that these agencies are going to be able to conduct this survey, ask people what their use was prior to legalization, and then all the data after that will be conducted by the board. That's my first amendment, Madam Speaker.
Cito Esmasi, Senator Talayi. On Senator Talahi's amendment, anyone wishing to speak? Senator Pt.2, I apologize, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just want to make a slight amendment to that amendment, and where the word that says marijuana to be changed to cannabis.
On that motion to change everywhere on this amendment from marijuana to cannabis,
Yes.
are there any objections? No objections. Motion carries. Anyone else wishing to speak on the amendment? If not, are there any objections? Senator, are there any objections? No objections. Motion carries. Your next amendment, Senator Pt.2. I mean Talahi. I
Okay.
apologize.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. All right, so my second amendment is regarding the composition of the Cannabis Control Board. This would be to add the Department of Public Health and Social Services, and also to add the Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness Center, and that would change the total members from 5 to 7. And of course, this was also what I found in other jurisdictions, and I noted in the testimony on this bill that Grassroots Guam also recommended including Department of Public Health on the Cannabis Board. And as we have discussed, the Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness Center is our main government service provider addressing substance abuse issues. So I would like them to be added also.
Thank you, Senator Terlahi, but also if we can just do the changing the 5 membership on the beginning of the amendment from 5 to 7 first, before changing it to 7 members, am I correct? Yes, so to change from 5 members to 7 members, on that amendment to the amendment, do you want to speak on, I know, but I wanted to just make the technical change from 5 members to 7 without any objections. Motion carries. Senator Lee, you are recognized on her amendment.
Sutusmasi, Madam Speaker. I also had an amendment to take a look at the appointment of members to this board. We also received some testimony and some objections to this bill by the Guam Visitors Bureau, and I think that having a GVB representative on the board will help to address some of the concerns that they've raised about the lack of consideration for how this new industry will impact our tourism industry. And so I think I agree with the mover of this amendment and with advocates who've come out and recommended that we have a representative from DPHSS, because I think that'll help to allow the adult use program to develop in sync with the medical program and eventually pave the way for a single program, which is what I think we all want. And I think strong community organizations and the Department of Revenue and Taxation, the main government agency that we are tasking with assisting the regulation of this industry, have raised these concerns. And so my amendment to the amendment is aimed at addressing those concerns. So I would just move that we keep the membership, or we change the membership to 7 members, and 1 member shall be the director of the Department of Public Health and Social Services or his or her designee, and then 1 member shall be the general manager of the Guam Visitors Bureau or his or her designee. And that would be my amendment.
Just repeat that one more time. You would take,
So
F has 2 members from the public,
So A, B, and C,
are in order.
yep, so Department of Revenue and Taxation, Department of Agriculture, and then Department of Public Health.
We'll have 1.
The director of the Department of Public Health and Social Services or his or her designee, and then 1 member shall be the general manager of the Guam Visitors Bureau or his or her designee. And then it continues, 1 member shall represent the Guam business community, no change there. And then 2 members shall represent the general public. At least 1 member from the general public shall possess a medical cannabis card.
So Senator Lee, if you may, also include to change it from 7 members to 8 members of the board. If you're going to add Guam Visitors Bureau.
No, Madam Speaker. So my amendment would be to keep the Department of Public Health and add Guam Visitors Bureau. Remove behavioral. My amendment was just for public health and GVB, and I think the Terlaki amendment has DPHSS and Guam Behavioral Health.
Right. Right. On that amendment to the amendment, Senator Sabina, you are recognized on Senator Lee's amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just have a point of inquiry regarding, does the Director of Department of Public Health or his or her designee, is that sufficient to make an assessment as far as substance abuse and prevention and treatment?
Who would you like the question addressed to?
I guess the person, the previous
Yield
speaker?
to the author.
The previous, or maybe, yeah, the author of the amendment.
Senator Therese, would you like to yield?
I'm not an expert, Madam Speaker, but I would think not, because we've created an entirely different agency to deal with Guam behavioral health issues. And so that's why I think it's important that they're also on there. And I have no objection. I mean, yeah, so that's all I can say is we've got Department of Public Health dealing with many, maybe overlapping, but the creation of an entirely different agency on Guam, I think, suggests that no, they are not adequate to deal with those issues, and they definitely don't do treatment of these of substance abuse or any type of issue like that.
Senator Paris, does that address your inquiry?
At the moment.
Thank you. Senator Lee?
So I'd like to amend that if you were correct in the initial reading. So the board shall have a membership of 8. So it contains DPHSS, GIPWIC, GVB.
On the Lee amendment, Senator San Augustine, you are recognized.
Madam Speaker, I recommend that our colleagues take a look at the numbers. Shouldn't be an even number, it should be an odd number. So if anything, add another number. Instead of 8, make it 9, if need be. And the only reason why, because you always, you got the rule of majority and so forth. It's no different like what we have here at the legislature. There's 15 of us.
So Senator San Augustine, I will dispose of her amendment first, and then you can add, and I can come back to you. On Senator Lee's amendment to Senator Terlahi's amendment, anyone else wishing to speak? If not, Senator Lee, would you like to close or call for the vote on that motion to add GVB as the 8th member without any objections? Motion carries. Senator San Augustine, you are recognized on the Terlahi amendment.
If on letter F, you have 2 members shall represent the general public, and at least 1 member from the general public shall possess a medical cannabis card. I would recommend, because you don't have to have a card to be on the board, remove that individual there, because I don't want anybody being biased.
Senator San Augustine, just tell me which, did you want to delete the shall possess the medical cannabis card, or just 1 member from the general public? Please
Just reduce 1 of the community, and okay, if we can pause for 1 minute, ma'am. Okay. Madam Speaker,
You are recognized, Senator San Augustine.
the amendment is to add the Attorney General's office or his designee, 1 more, and it'll become 9.
On that motion to include the Attorney General's office, Senator Titagui on Senator San Augustine's amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
To the
Madam
amendment.
Speaker, I stand in full support. I think this would be a great fit into this group. It provides a wealth of knowledge and data and information that they have in their office that we may not know of, so it's a great contribution. So thank you, Madam Speaker, and I support the amendment.
Si Jos Masi. On the San Augustine amendment, are there any objections? No objections. Motion carries. Senator Terlahi on the amendment as amended.
Thank you again, colleagues, and thank you, Madam Speaker. So the final amendment is just on 1 section of the bill where it allows the board to promulgate rules and regulations that it will be pursuant to the administrative adjudication law in Chapter 9 of Title 5 Guam Code annotated. This is adding a line to
Hold on.
line 20, page 21.
No, but if we can just first to close on this amendment
Oh,
as amended.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
On the motion for Senator Therese Terlahi's amendment as amended, with all the inclusions, without any objections, motion carries. Senator Therese, on your next
Thank
amendment.
you. So the final amendment is to add the AAA process for the rules and regulations. Now, I know that there's another amendment passed out earlier for another section. This would just add to that. Hopefully that one gets passed also. So this is on line 20, page 21. When the board is promulgating any additional rules and regulations to do their job, that they would do that pursuant to the AAA.
On that amendment, are there any discussions? Are there hearing no objections? Motion carries. Senator Chalayi, you still have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's been an almost surreal experience the past few days. Since last Friday, we've been in this legislative hall discussing, and over the weekend also with constituents discussing nothing but gambling and marijuana, really. And a part of me felt a little sad. It's as if we had no other dreams for our children or on our beautiful island or pursuit of any other priorities or industry. And I've reviewed carefully the testimony and the comments to the petition submitted in favor of this new bill. And it's my assessment that many, maybe even up to 75% of those who are asking us to pass this bill are really after cannabis for their medical or psychological health purposes. They're frustrated, that rightly so, that the medicinal marijuana program is delayed. I've been in full support of Guam's current laws authorizing medicinal cannabis for cancer patients and others suffering from illnesses. And the legislature has passed legislation for workarounds to implement medicinal cannabis, which improve the law that was passed by referendum. The new director of the Department of Public Health and Social Services, who was confirmed less than a month ago at our first legislative session, held a briefing on March 18, just 8 days ago, on the medicinal marijuana law, and she promised that Department of Public Health would focus and finally do its part after years of inaction to get the program in place ASAP. She proposed a budget of approximately $800,000 to begin to shore up the medicinal cannabis program. And she made a concrete recommendation that the legislature remove the residency restrictions on lab owners so that Guam can attract off-island investors for the required lab. A lab or a cannabis testing facility was found necessary by the people of Guam for the protection of patients. I would think that it is also necessary to protect recreational users as well. But today in this bill, we're asked to take a huge departure from the medicinal cannabis approach and legalize cannabis for all purposes for anyone over 21. And I support the decriminalizing of marijuana. I support the current government's policy that already allows the possession of marijuana, that deprioritizes the prosecution of marijuana offenses, that expands treatment courts instead of jail time for drug offenses. This is what other states like Vermont have done in legalizing marijuana. But way beyond legalizing it, we are asked in a very short time period to pass this bill to stand up a retail marijuana industry, including cultivation, manufacturing, and distribution. At the same time, protection of our children from access to this substance, protection of our roads from further tragedy due to impaired driving, protection of our people from pesticides, poison, dependency, and other harm from the use. This is a much bigger task than agreeing that precious government resources will not be used for prosecution of marijuana cases, or that our prisons and court systems will not be overcrowded due to marijuana infractions. Changing course to a retail marijuana industry is a task that involves a myriad of public policy decisions along the way, and a lot of work in advance of implementation. Most importantly, it requires and necessitates the consensus of the community for its success. And it requires dedication of our government agencies, the enforcement agencies, who we will be leaning on and relying on even more than we do today. We as a community can and must determine the best ways to do this, given the restrictions we face under federal law, our unique political status, what we have learned from other jurisdictions, and by keeping focus on what we hope for our children along the way. The key for me, however, is that the switch to the retail industry is something that in every other jurisdiction in the United States, except for Vermont and the CNMI, was done with consensus of the residents, as evidenced by a referendum. I do not necessarily think we need a referendum if a consensus is readily apparent. But it does appear, as it stands today, that a consensus is not readily apparent in our community. The fact is that this bill is opposed by many, Some are veterans, some are older, some who have committed their lives to law enforcement, the judicial system, public health, behavioral health. Some are nonprofit advocates against disease and abuse. Some are from the generation who built Guam from rubble, who built our economy to what it is today, while resisting the fast cash of gambling and other industries, and who have sacrificed and persevered through hardship and preserved for us the beauty of what Guam is today. The author of the bill, when motioning for its adoption on Friday, stated that any legislator who wants a referendum or to refer the bill back to committee to flesh out the details is a coward, not a problem solver. I've heard on talk shows hosts say that anyone who doesn't vote in favor of this bill as is an obstructionist and would not get his support. I've been sent emails from some of my closest younger friends, partners in the promotion of Chamorro culture and the arts, advocates in the change of status for Guam, protectors of ancient villages and our beautiful natural resources, fighters for justice and the cleanup of past contamination, who claim that they do not have a debilitating or painful illness, but marijuana is so important and necessary in their lives on a daily basis that they do not want to feel like criminals for using it, and that if I did not vote for this bill as is, I was simply not a leader, and they and their friends would never support me again. This line drawing, the pitting of our community against each other and division over this substance really is, I don't believe, even native to Guam. In the face of destruction of thousands of acres of limestone forests and native medicinal plants, in the big picture, to me, it's just very perplexing. The bill is a huge policy change. It's a risk and a significant resource shift that requires respect for all in our community, and additional opportunity for them to be heard and for them to hear and gain confidence in what the proponents of this bill have been convinced of, that passage of this bill will not exacerbate what they legitimately fear because of what they have lived through, the very real and devastating impacts of drug use on our families, loss of identity, lack of inspiration and role models for our youth, that the industry will spiral out of control due to the inability of our current government to regulate and to plan and to react as necessary to the impacts. These elder generations are not stupid and they are not cowards. It's they who've built us up, who, when heroin and ice ravaged our island, they dealt with the painful consequences. I believe they are entitled to be comfortable with our decision, to be fully informed, to be paid respect. It's part of our job here to bring the community along with us, to show them that they can trust us to hear them, and we can reassure them if we work harder at it, stick to facts instead of threats or rushing, and if we actually get our agencies involved and approach this in a concerted way, step by step, instead of politically expedient passing a bill that passes the buck, and then the benefits of the industry are held in abeyance or operate in chaos for years while the agencies scramble without resources to deal with the mess. I've read the bill over and over, and I want to acknowledge that some of the best that we can learn from other jurisdictions from their adoption of recreational cannabis has been incorporated in this bill, such as restricting the use for only adults aged 21 and older, restrictions on the amount of marijuana and marijuana plants that can be possessed for personal use, not allowing marijuana to be consumed in public or for the marijuana plants to be enclosed in a locked place, not allowing driving under the influence of cannabis, restricting the display of cannabis items visibly to the general public from a public right-of-way, involving different government agencies in the Cannabis Control Board. I want to assure all the advocates in our community that have worked so hard to educate themselves and the rest of us that I have read all the materials sent in the committee report and those sent to me by email or text message, and done a lot of research on my own, of course with the assistance of my staff. I don't think I could have done it by myself, which I think is significant for us here in the legislature. However, as evidenced by the various commissions and advisory boards mandated to continuously assess the implications for their jurisdictions, I think it's fair to say that there remain some unknowns in this relatively new industry, and certainly unknowns for this industry on Guam, requiring that one agency came up with the rules and regulations, or two agencies came up with the rules and regulations for the entire government was unrealistic, and I'm glad that we have included more people on the board. We should take the time we need and use all experts in the government and beyond to truly determine the executive branch's collective vision and ability to implement a retail cannabis industry on Guam at this time. The bill was introduced on January 31, and it had its first and only public hearing on March 7, although there were two during that day, and did not incorporate, but the bill reported out did not incorporate any of the suggestions made during that public hearing. Only two government agencies testified at the hearing: the Department of Revenue and Taxation, who was neither in support or against, but said that they are up for the challenge of their role in this new industry, and the Department of Agriculture, who did say that they support the bill. Since the hearing, the Guam Visitors Bureau has asked for 2 months to complete a study of potential response from their top Asian markets, instead of merely relying on the hypotheses of some of the marijuana proponents that our tourism industry will flourish, or that we should rely on Colorado tourism to predict changes in Guam's tourism. Should we also rely on the changes in Colorado's homeless populations to predict an increase in Guam's homeless population? We've heard from the news that the governor supports the bill in concept. Yet the committee report after the hearing is devoid of any input or review of the bill from our public health institutions and experts, our behavioral health institutions and experts, who will undoubtedly bear the burden of protecting our youth from the adverse effects of marijuana on their young brains, protecting our residents and tourists from poisoning from pesticides or other harmful products, protecting our families from drivers that are impaired. We must ensure that we do not impede or detract from the time and resources the government of Guam has already dedicated in critical fights against the effects from smoking tobacco, alcohol consumption, high incidence of disease, all while dealing with federal restrictions. These agencies will no doubt be brought in to work on the rules and regulations, but without advance assurances of support from this legislature. I've also noticed that the social work community, normally very clear advocates for programs that they believe will help those in need in our society, has been silent on this bill. Colorado's recreational marijuana industry law was not enacted overnight. It came after approximately 4 years of active medicinal marijuana policies and tweaking, and after 2 years of decriminalizing the use and allowing home growing of marijuana. It incorporates studies and data to track its progress. Colorado's electorate were asked whether to transition from medicinal to legal recreational marijuana, and asked again whether to transition to retail marijuana industry. Still, a review of Colorado's program by public health experts points to a lack of baseline data and suggests that any other jurisdiction thinking of similarly legalizing marijuana first conduct pre-implementation baseline studies of its residents in order to accurately assess changes caused after the enactment. Since July 2018, recreational use of marijuana has been legal in Vermont. The law allows people aged 21 and older to possess up to 1 ounce of marijuana and also 4 immature plants per household. Despite the revenue being generated by Colorado and Washington, Vermont did not immediately adopt retail sales. In December 2018, they finalized a report regarding moving forward with retail sales, recommending a 20% excise tax and that $1 million be set aside to study the effects of cannabis use. Their governor has promised to hold off on any retail sales until highway safety measures can be agreed on, because there's no clear scientific way currently to measure impairment to driving by cannabis or cannabis in conjunction with alcohol or other drugs. We have a consensus in our community on medicinal use. It took other states years to effectively implement their programs, and we know that a lab is crucial. We can and should pursue a testing facility immediately. It took some states like Hawaii years to effectively implement their medicinal cannabis programs, and we should not be discouraged, but we should work harder under our new agency directors and our new governor. We also have a consensus in our community to decriminalize and remove penalties for possession of marijuana, to alleviate the judicial and law enforcement systems for marijuana cases. Where we must work to gain consensus is in the details of how a retail industry will move forward, how it will be regulated effectively despite program after program on Guam that is ineffectively regulated, other taxes that are ineffectively collected, and protections for our youth that are currently not in place or not up to par. This is the hard work of this legislature and the executive branch, which must include transparency and deliberation along the way. I am very thankful that debate on this bill has, I think, made some excellent improvements to the bill. It's my experience that collaboration has always made things better here on the floor and out in the community. With utmost respect for my colleagues and the hard work already put into this, however, I would move that the bill be referred back to committee with all the amendments intact for future input from GVB and executive branch agencies who will be tasked with upholding and regulating this new industry. So we are not surprised after passage from departments like DYA, and most especially that we can hear from the Department of Public Health and Social Services and the Department of Behavioral Health before we put it to a final vote. And so I especially ask that on this motion that all the amendments be intact, because I do recognize that the bill has been improved, I believe, and that there has been a lot of hard work put in. But GVB's asked for a mere couple months to get their data back. And so that I would ask my colleagues to consider that motion, Madam Speaker.
A motion to refer this bill in committee with all amendments intact. Senator Rigel, this is not...
I object to the motion.
Thank you. On the vote, all those in favor to move it back to committee with all amendments intact, signify by raising your hand. Motion fails. Senator San Augustine?
Madam Speaker, I ask that we reconsider the motion that was passed that identified the appointment of members to the Cannabis Board, and that to remove or replace the Attorney General, because I've been advised by legal that it would be inappropriate to have the Attorney General on the board versus having the Chief of Police or his designee.
Okay. Based on that, on the motion to reconsider without any objections, motion carries. On the motion by Senator Joe San Augustine to add instead the Guam Police Department or the Chief of the Guam Police Department or his designee, am I correct?
That's correct, ma'am.
On that motion, is there any objection? No objection. Motion carries. I did. Thank you. Now on the motion as amended to have that GPD is in now the member or his designee. On that amendment, are there any objections? No objections. Motion carries. On the main motion, I will recognize Senator Tello for a reconsideration.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I ask the body their indulgence and the consideration to allow me to speak. I didn't realize, Madam Speaker, at the time I was doing my amendment was also the opportunity to speak on the bill itself as a whole. So I ask for your reconsideration.
On that reconsideration motion? Yeah. Yes. Yes. Because she... On that motion, without any objections, motion carries. Senator Pt.2, I will recognize you to speak on the main motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And thank you, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity to offer my comments in support of Bill 32-35. With the growing movement towards legislation of cannabis in states and territories are now realizing that prohibition of cannabis has done nothing more than fill our prisons, prohibit us from a safer alternative other than alcohol, hindering the taxation on already a high use of cannabis, and addressing the black market. But most especially, the hesitation we have toward physicians prescribing cannabis for medical purposes. Madam Speaker, many of the people who spoke before me, the senators who spoke before me, had data and information that they pulled up from the internet. And believe you me, there is at least 100 sites you can go to and look at. And some of them are very contradictive. So, Madam Speaker, I have before me some information myself that I would like to proffer to this body to also consider, and the data that I pulled up as well. So, Madam Speaker, according to the October 2018 report on the impact of cannabis legalization, issued by the Colorado Department of Public Safety Division of Criminal Justice, with respect to public arrests involving cannabis, the total number of cannabis arrests decreased by 52% between 2012 and 2017. That's from 12,709 to only 6,153. Madam Speaker, in the terms of the impact of adult cannabis use on youth, according to the survey summarized by the Washington Post in December of 2017 article, the rate of adolescent cannabis use in Colorado had fallen to the lowest level in nearly a decade. The data showed that adolescent cannabis use fell nationwide in 2016. In no states did teens using cannabis increase by a significant amount. And in no number, including California, Colorado, Maine, New Jersey, Texas, rates of teen cannabis use fell considerably. Madam Speaker, as you know, alcohol that was prohibited until the federal government stepped in to create regulations for its use. Madam Speaker, according to additional research shared by the Business Insider, a large review published in August last year in the medical journal, The Lancet, found that among people aged 15 to 49, alcohol use was the leading health risk factor across the globe in 2016, with 3.8% of all female deaths and 12.2% of all male deaths attributed to the alcohol use. Alcohol use is a leading factor for global disease, burden, and causes sustainable health loss, the researchers wrote in their paper, and the level of consumption that minimizes health loss is 0. Madam Speaker, with respect to the difference between alcohol and cannabis between 1999 and 2016, the number of annual deaths that occurred from alcohol-related substance grew to 65%, from 20,000 to 661 to 34,174 deaths. Meanwhile, no deaths from cannabis, overdoses, or abuse have ever been reported according to the Drug Enforcement Administration. Moreover, a 16-year study of more than 65,000 Americans published in the American Journal of Public Health found that healthy cannabis users were not more likely to die earlier than healthy people who did not use cannabis. That's quoted out of the American Journal of Public Health. Madam Speaker, another argument against the bill by those who haven't tried cannabis or who haven't even done their research on cannabis, it's simply easy for them to say cannabis is a gateway drug. Madam Speaker, the federal government mandated to pull certain mentions of the gateway theory on the federal government websites because there's no science behind it. They were ordered to remove it as they violated the Information Quality Act. Madam Speaker, Maria McCormick, a professor of Harvard and the chair of the Committee of the Health Effects of Cannabis. She was the chairman of the Evidence Review and Research Agenda. And she says, cannabis does not increase the use to other drugs. In fact, they found it's actually tobacco. One thing that, Madam Speaker, nobody has mentioned either are the companies that are backing to stop the legalization of marijuana or cannabis. Let's say cannabis, because let's imagine if I said marijuana and then I say cannabis, which do you feel more comfortable with? Cannabis. We both know that. We all know that. But the stigma of marijuana has been with us since, 1935? So let's say cannabis, just to make people feel more comfortable. But let's talk about the companies that are against the legalization. Tobacco companies. Do you know why? Because it'll hurt their profit. Private prisons. Because there'll be a reduction in prisoners. Distilleries. That's beer companies. Spirits. That's also going to hurt their profits. But most especially big pharma. Pharmaceutical companies who've been lobbying since 1940 to stop any type of legalization for cannabis as a drug. I wonder why. And I wonder why, when they had a referendum in Arizona, that this one large pharmaceutical company, INSYS, spelled INSYS, contributed $5,000 to the campaign against legalization of cannabis. I wonder why. These people use the quotation words, think of the children. Where were these companies when they were putting out their ads on TV, when they were thinking of the children? Madam Speaker, I too received countless emails and phone calls and texts as well, for and against. And it wasn't until I had somebody in my office ask me, "Why are you so driven to vote for this bill?" And then as I spoke to him about the movement that's happening in front, I remembered this one video of the countless videos that I've looked at during this time of my research. And I'd like to thank the senator from Jotnya for also recognizing our staff who also spent many hours in looking in this. We all know that medicinal marijuana or medicinal cannabis, we all agreed upon that it was important. Until you know what it's like to be sick, until you know what it's like to know that you are not going to be in control because of your sickness. It was this one woman who said she was so grateful that they passed legalization of cannabis, and it was already medicinal. But it gave her the sense of control to walk in a dispensary and decide how much she's going to take, when she's going to take it. It was a feeling of control, being able to decide for yourself, not a doctor deciding for you or telling you how much to take or when to take it. When you know you're going to die, that's the only thing you're holding on to, is your ability to decide for yourself before it's too late and before somebody has to decide for you or take care of you. We have gone through a long road for medicinal marijuana or medicinal cannabis. This simply makes it easier for those who are sick to have access and not be so afraid. This is easier for our physicians to be able to prescribe. My sister has less than 1 month to live. And we've had to send her to Hawaii because we know the care would have been better there. And the obstacles that surround her situation made it easier for her to be able to partake in something that's going to help her through her last days. Madam Speaker, we did an amazing job here to cover all angles. And it doesn't stop here. If this bill passes, it doesn't stop us from continuing to make this bill stronger, safer for our community. It doesn't stop here. It keeps going. Madam Speaker, the federal government really What have they done for us? Hindered us from providing H-2 workers on Guam so that our families can build homes? Provided us with unfunded mandates? I know the concerns about the federal government in this issue. Well, maybe if we pass this bill, maybe they'll start paying attention to us. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
C2 Smasi, Senator Taitagui. At this time, before I call for the author to close, Senator Lee, I will give you the opportunity at this time. You are recognized.
Suzus Masi, Madam Speaker, I rise in support of Bill 32, and I do so as a mother and as a biochemist. I studied general chemistry, organic chemistry, biology, anatomy, physiology, and biochemistry at the University of Washington. And as someone who loves science and who loves policy and who loves our island, this measure and this debate has been a great exercise. And I want to thank my colleagues and I want to thank our staff who has helped us to contribute to all of these amendments and to bring this measure to where it is right now. At its best, data is supposed to clarify the public debate, not distort it. Good or bad, pro or con, in favor of or against, the data is supposed to be driven by the scientific method, not deeply rooted public opinions. But in a world where information is at our fingertips, unbiased, scientifically rigorous knowledge is harder and harder to find. A generation ago, everyone was entitled to his or her own opinions, but no one was entitled to their own facts. Now, everyone has a scientific study. Every nightmare scenario can be preceded by a new study shows X, Y, or Z. A previous speaker had mentioned the Information Quality Act. And recognizing the horrible impact that bad science could have on public policy, the US Congress passed what became known as the Information Quality Act in the early 2000s. The Information Quality Act requires federal agencies to employ sound science in making regulations and disseminating information. It also provides a mechanism for people and companies to challenge government information that they believe to be inaccurate. Business, consumer, environmental, and conservation groups have all used the IQA to pursue changes in government policies. Under the IQA's guidelines, the term quality encompasses utility, objectivity, and integrity, meaning that the information should be useful to the public, should be secure from unauthorized revision, and should be objective in its presentation and its substance. In order for public information to be considered objective, it must be presented in an articulate, an accurate, clear, complete, and unbiased manner. Agencies must present the information in the proper context and identify both the sources of the information and the methods used to produce it, along with full documentation so the public can access whether there may be a reason to question its objectivity. The information must be accurate, reliable, and unbiased, and based on sound research methods. Information that is influential, scientific, financial, or statistical information. That is, information that has a substantial impact on important public policies or private sector decisions, also must be reproducible to demonstrate its objectivity. But why should the federal government's Information Quality Act matter to us? Madam Speaker, because some of the information shared on this floor, some of the alleged science sent us over the weekend is so bad that the federal government can no longer represent it as the truth. In 2017, after months of public pressure, the Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA, has removed factually inaccurate information from its website. The change comes after Americans for Safe Access, which is a national nonprofit dedicated to ensuring safe and legal access to medical cannabis for therapeutic use and research, filed a legal request with the Department of Justice last year demanding that the DEA immediately update and remove factually inaccurate information about cannabis from their website and from their materials. Americans for Safe Access argued that more than 25 false statements on the DEA's website about cannabis constituted a violation of the IQA, which requires that administrative agencies not provide false information to the public and that they respond to these requests for correction of information within 60 days. One publication, and I quote, "The Dangers and Consequences of Marijuana," contained 23 of the 25 factual inaccuracies in violation of the Information Quality Act. Such inaccuracies included claims that cannabis was a gateway drug, that cannabis caused irreversible cognitive decline in adults, that cannabis contributed to psychosis and lung cancer. Madam Speaker, if this same bad science isn't good enough for the U.S. Justice Department and the DEA, it shouldn't be good enough for Legislature and Guahan and the people of Guam. Moreover, Madam Speaker, I know that every mother, every parent in this hall shares the same goal, regardless of their views on this debate. We all want our children to grow safe, successful, strong, wherever their lives may take them. For that reason, I ask you this: what do Harvard, the Air Force Academy, MIT, Georgetown, Microsoft, and Amazon all have in common? All of them, every single one, are located in a place where adult use of cannabis is legal. And amid all the bad science, all the fear that this debate can spread, one simple fact remains true. 10 states and Washington, D.C. have legalized the adult use of cannabis since 2012, and not a single one has repealed their laws and gone back to prohibition. Not one. Each of us understands the immense power of public opinion in the political process. With it, anything is possible. Without it, great ideas die before ever seeing the light of day. So why aren't there a pack of politicians racing to repeal these laws in each of these states? If adult use cannabis makes us unsafe, then why isn't there a massive movement for change? Madam Speaker, I have taken a long time to think about my position on adult use cannabis and my position on Bill 32. And while no thoughtful scientific evidence has caused me to doubt my support for it, parents generally hate the possibility of increased risk to our kids, no matter how small. This is why I was shocked to learn that some lawmakers, some countries sought to legalize adult use cannabis not to make money, but to protect our young people. In a 2018 interview, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was asked about how much the Canadian government could collect from the adult use of cannabis. He didn't know. Trudeau argued that so long as it was easier for young people to buy cannabis than it was to buy beer, Canada's youth would not be safe. Drug dealers won't card you to make sure that you are 21. Drug dealers don't have to tell you how the cannabis was grown, what was added to it, or how strong it is. Drug dealers don't have to be licensed. Their places of business are never disclosed to the public or subject to inspection. Like many policymakers, Trudeau argued a simple truth. Pretending you don't have a problem doesn't make it disappear. Madam Speaker, no one regulates drug dealers or the criminal enterprises that they engage in. And we know that the profits from the illegal sale of marijuana are often used to buy dangerous drugs in distribution quantities. We know cocaine mysteriously lands on our shores, and that crime overtaking our streets comes from meth, not marijuana. With this vote, we can dramatically decrease the profitability of illegal marijuana. We can regulate cannabis and make it safe. We can hurt drug dealers and cut off a vital part of their income stream. Because science, common sense, and popular will throughout the country seem so supportive of acts like this, some have said that we can't pass this bill because it would be against federal law. This body's legal counsel is clear. We have a sound legal basis to act. And now, that same opinion is bolstered by Carlo Dizon, a practicing attorney on Guam and a graduate of Yale, the London School of Economics, and Stanford Law. On this topic, Carlo writes, and I quote, "First, while Guam law flows from the Organic Act, it would be inaccurate to say that, quote, all Guam law is an extension of federal law," close quote. The Ninth Circuit has recognized that Congress in the Organic Act evidenced clear intent to allow Guam to develop its own independent institutions. EIE Guam Corp. Versus the Supreme Court of Guam, Ninth Circuit, 1999. That congressional intent also, quote, allows the Guam Supreme Court to develop Guam's common law and to develop sufficient legal traditions and precedent. And that's Hauser v. Department of Law, Ninth Circuit, 2004. And the Supreme Court of Guam has recognized that the Guam Legislature may play a role in defining common law. For example, in GIAA v. Moylan, the Supreme Court held that common law powers and duties may be subject to increase, alteration, or abridgment by the Guam Legislature. That's us. Because criminal law derives from both statutory and common law, one can argue this bill has roots in common law and thus would be part and parcel of Guam's ability to develop its own independent institutions. At the minimum, because of Guam's ability to define local common law, it would be oversimplistic to state that, quote, all Guam law is an extension of federal law. Second, Attorney Trapp's comment appears to conflate two issues. The federal scheduling of cannabis as a controlled substance on one hand, and the federal enforcement against illegal possession of controlled substances on the other. On the first issue, Congress has shown no intent, through the Organic Act or otherwise, for the federal schedule of controlled substances to preempt Guam's schedule. And Congress has such power to compel, for example, the Organic Act requires our tax code to mirror the federal tax code until we establish our own. Because the Guam Legislature has retained the power to schedule controlled substances, it should also have the power to deschedule them. Finally, Madam Speaker, The truth is, even if this bill passes, we aren't done yet. Rules and regulations must be submitted to this body within 1 year of the statute's enactment. That means this law cannot be effective without a second layer of legislative concurrence under the rulemaking process. And like every jurisdiction which has legalized cannabis, our laws can and should be fine-tuned, as a previous speaker had mentioned. They should evolve. Put simply, colleagues, while this bill might buy the car, no one gets to drive it off the lot without a license. And that is the license we provide by adopting, rejecting, or letting lapse the rules of this program. If you are on the fence, if you think you need more time or more evidence to decide, consider allowing this bill to pass. Help us with the amendments. And let this process continue. Allow the governor to impanel the commission, allow them to submit rules, regs, and an EIS to us. And then let's decide whether we're taking the car off the lot. But for now, let's allow the process to continue. And Madam Speaker, let us choose progress over paralysis. And with that, there are 2 amendments that I'd like to proffer. I think they've been disseminated to my colleagues. The first one is to add a new Section 17 to the bill. Does everybody have that? It's titled Independent Economic Impact Statement.
Page 29, line 11. Yes, Senator, you can proceed.
Do you want me to read the
Yes,
full
please.
amendment, or okay? So Section 17, Independent Economic Impact Statement. A, not less than 90 days from the effective date of this act, the Guam Visitors Bureau shall issue a request for proposal for the purpose of conducting an independent economic impact study relative to the legalization of cannabis for adult use in Guam. GVB is authorized to expend funds from the Tourism Attraction Fund to fund the independent economic impact study. GVB, in collaboration with the Guam Economic Development Authority and the University of Guam, shall determine the study's parameters. B, the independent economic impact statement shall be completed by an identified group that includes an economist who holds a Doctor of Philosophy or a master's degree in economics from an institution of higher learning accredited by an accreditation agency recognized by the U.S. Secretary of Education or an accrediting body that is recognized internationally. This EIS shall be transmitted to the Speaker of the Legislature in Guahan no later than 1 year from the effective date of this act. And it continues, the current Section 17 is amended to read Section 18, effective date. This act shall become effective upon enactment. And Madam Speaker, I offer this amendment to address some of the concerns that have been raised regarding the lack of awareness on the economic impact of this new industry, including how this new industry will affect our tourism industry, as well as a comparison of the expected increase in the tax base versus the cost of enforcement. This amendment would task the Guam Visitors Bureau with overseeing the development of an EIS, working together with GITA and UOG, which would be submitted within 1 year. And I think under this time frame, we'll have the results of the EIS and the proposed rules and regs. It's my hope that we will be able to review them concurrently. Situsmasi.
Situsmasi, Senator Lee, on that amendment. Are there anyone wishing to speak on the amendment? Senator Therese, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I object to this amendment the way it's written. I agree that an economic impact study is very important to start up a new industry if we're going to invest in it, which is what we are requiring some of these departments, like Revenue Tax especially, to do immediately after passage of this bill. I'm questioning why, if we are finding the information from BBMR as to the fiscal impacts of this bill to be not valid or not reliable, then why are we rushing to proceed? I agree that this impact study is something that should be done prior to that, if it's necessary. But most especially, I'm standing up here in objection to the amendment because the source of funding is GVB. GVB has already, on its own, without being required by the legislature, decided to move forward and to do its own study as to the impacts on the tourism industry. But this, I'm not sure if it's meant to stop them from doing that and to study the entire impacts on the entire government of Guam economy. I think that's beyond the parameters of GVB. I suspect that, I don't want to suspect anything, but I think if an impact study has to be done, then we are saying that we don't rely on any of the information in our current committee report to be reliable. And also, I think GVB is not the person to do the economic impact study for the entire government of Guam. It's concentrating on the economic impacts to the visitor industry. I think GITA is rightly included in here. I actually think if you look at where we have our economists on Guam, we have one at BSP, and that's the one who, if I remember correctly, at our recent meeting with the SES, they were the ones who came and testified as to, our general economy, and the factors that affect it. So I would suggest that I don't know, I'm not an expert in that, but I would expect that BSP and GITA, and that GITA can fund this if they need it. They're also supposed to be our financial experts in the government of Guam, and that if they need it, they can fund this out of GVB funds, which seem to be available through their community, I don't know if they call them community access grants or their from the QC programs. But I guess I'm just, that's my concern, is that we're just raiding GVB's pocket to fund a study for the rest of the government of Guam. But I do agree that if BBMR's data was not reliable and it did not incorporate the cost of implementing the program, then there's a problem.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator. There has been an objection. Anyone else wishing to speak to the amendment? Senator Sabina, then Senator P. She raised opposition in the beginning. She did not. Senator Terlai, are you making? She just raised an objection. I have Senator Sabina Perez on the amendment, then Senator Pt.2 on the Lee amendment. Senator Sabina Perez, you're recognized on the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's just my concern that when the RFP is written, that it's not overly restrictive in creating the specifications. So my concern as this amendment is written, my concern is that it may be overly restrictive in writing the specs. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Pito Terlai, put for vote, consiguen mo na.
Madam Speaker. Guahu mamartikula sa mekung ko hafasia diskukuti gwinina haani jan ST bio. Zabe sangana no sa poputi ST bio 32. Nangata be sangana an estabaw gi policeman Guahu magasin narcotics division. Za ezu na tempo guaha na puengi inaresta 21 na tao sa pudi manutsupa. Lo haji sina sumanganyo gwini na guaha manaksidenti pudi manupa marijuana. Haji sina sumanganyo gwini na guaha mamatay, guaha finatay gwini jangin manupa marijuana. Jangin taatan siya iletra ni manma pepika hujong ginin Amerika studio siya ni matsutsugi. Jangin atan John Taytay put marijuana. Gua hijilik na baba. Gua hijilik na maulik. Maningkubikaw tau nesti siya informasyon. Lo gua husasangan nesti por experienza. Ane faisino si Senator Joel Pabenhamin na dos pabay unugi co-sponsor. Udah laki senidota sa utungwa na taza binabana esti marijuana bi taza binabana cannabis. As a matter of fact, let me just say that I think cannabis as a miracle plant. Sa medyo lili man fina mamuling ni esti na marijuana. Jahafa na sigya man tasangan na baba. Ejo isumasangan na baba esti marijuana. Ililiko na ma brainwashes ta gini man mapo siya na tempo. Sa manay natay lingdia gitati na tempo. Na munga manupa sa babasti i marijuana ti matungog na tempo afa cannabis. Lo esta na chetun iman masangin niya imanay nata. Na munga masogwi sa muna baba sa jangin magatsaw sumutso pa marijuana maaristaw. Etsigi binabana. Lo leliko na unsuka tapasa pati tapasa taja tinilay ka gihinasota. Anti tapasa sti ni para tana ligad cannabis para marijuana anti tapasa. Sige atasangan por 21 ang hulo na edad na sina mausay marijuana, sina magoti, sina mabotsa parafa. Pesedye 21, papa. Tisina magoti. Besang na pago. Dani hafa tatsogwa bityo manapara. Bigana 20 di menos de 21 mananano marijuana kaya 21 ang mas. Debi di taatan ni Stefanello sa uno. Taja ambi. Tadlilia. Todo iman testigo gini masasangana. Neji sungupoputis ti Pt.2 masasangana na taja mamatay put marijuana. Taja mamatay put marijuana. Edwa na sinausangan esti anay malaungo si tataw. Fina maulik ni marijuana. Anay guaho commander ni Narcotics Division gi Guam Police Department. Man mafatu siya man amko. Zama professional niya lahiyo. Kugwa chungkun marijuana. Giufisinamo. Leku tafasay na. Lena kusina unanayam ni hali marijuana. Sa jangin din set ni ji hali marijuana jangimin afa mamolikam. Anak mamolik sinintin mami. Pesedyo fanelo samjo ni man atungo gini mangatsongo por senidor. Tanisisita maatan son suka tita pasa esti Pt.2. Edwa sampi tita pa mege man marirista gifa magonta antita pasa esti Pt.2. Taiguiga sitwasyon. Todo sampi. Dalili ko na migay na ni di menos 21 man mananan min marijuana kaya 21 ni mas lo sita taata na fidel jangin tapasas ti inajuda ekonomiya jangin tapasas ti di menos man maresta gifamagunta gua sumasangan na mungahit pumasas ti Pt.2 sa patapurtei ifamagun afanelos Honggi na ifamagonta tori tempo taputetiha. Lo jangin tita pasas ti. Sempia ifamagonta ufan mananagin edzo i marijuana. Sa manano sempu edzo da maespia empenyo po fanupa. Tita protete jangin tita pasas ti nebio. Actually afanelos tita Mungkin sumangan na ta protective magunta sa unsakat tita pasas ti sempre magunta man malago mananaw jung man chuli marijuana jam manupa. Masina ta protehi ifa magunta jangin ta pasas ti sa uno sempre sina lufuno in litera to control the issues of cultivation and distribution of marijuana ginigi lugata. Po sa fanelos in liya sa ipan. Taja tabiya ningongo ko na mandinifefectay famaguon gigwato gid sa ipan anay mapasas ti. Guaho mamatikula jo so ekungog todo. Guaha siya sumasangan na babasa gagi report. Este Colorado, gagi silu Colorado, esta pago que sa ngangani na babay marijuana.
Si Diyos
Conflicting nature in English. There's people, the business that eji mafatiti na si amul siya, they're against the passage of marijuana because you know why? You know why? Because their company is gonna go down, no matter how you look at it.
Si Diyos.
Lo hamzo fanelos deputy na kungo gaste. A fanelos wahag winigi mangatsung mungahir muna possibly asti i para ta aprebas ti marijuana.
Si Diyos masi.
Jahon na sanganyo hafa marijuana ko waham gi maripoti ko nagwa matay put marijuana. Si Jesus masi, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
Si Diyos masi. On the amendment, anyone else? Vice Speaker Nelson, you are recognized on Senator Lee's motion. Amendment.
Si Just Masi, Madam Speaker. I did not want to interrupt the previous speaker, but just a point of order. Are we speaking on the bill or are we speaking on the amendment?
Vice Speaker, I will share that the previous speaker was given the opportunity to speak on the amendment. He was speaking in the native tongue.
I understood what he was saying, Madam
On the
Speaker.
motion,
there was
on
no
the
reference
amendment.
to the amendment.
On the amendment, anyone else wishing to speak?
I'm just asking that you please be fair.
Senator San
I do have
Agustin, you are
something to speak
recognized.
on the amendment, Madam Speaker.
On the amendment, Vice Speaker, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, this is a good amendment. An economic impact study absolutely has to be done. But when we look at an economic impact study, it's usually before something is about to happen that's going to impact us. Now, I support this amendment, but I really hope that we can pause for cause, and do an economic impact study before we push this bill forward. This is not a political issue. This is going to impact us as a whole. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Nelson. Senator San Agustin, you are recognized.
Madam Speaker, I just rise in support of the amendment and just remind my colleagues that did attend the SCS meeting, the Special Economic Session. GVB did speak about conducting a tourism and an economic impact study. And I understand what my other colleagues are saying, that we should do it beforehand, but they did offer to do one, and being that this amendment is asking them to do it, I look forward to their study.
Si Diyos masi. Anyone else on the amendment? If not, I will ask the senator, good senator from Tamuning, to close or to ask for the vote.
Sidus Masi, Madam Speaker. I echo the sentiments of the retiring speaker. I offer this amendment because the Guam Visitors Bureau has asked us for it. And it's important that we note, given the language, GVB only...
Point of order, Madam Speaker. The Guam Visitors Bureau has never asked us to raid their fund to fund an economic study for the entire government of Guam.
Excuse me, is that a...
They've asked for us to be allowed time to simply do a study on the visitor industry, the impacts to the visitor industry.
Madam Speaker?
Thank you.
GVB doesn't own the Tourist Attraction Fund. The people of Guam do. So we are not raiding their funds. This fund belongs to the people of Guam. The Guam Visitors Bureau has asked us for more information. They have asked us for an impact study to be done and with regard to this bill and how it would impact our number one industry. And so we were providing this remedy within this amendment. If other colleagues have other amendments, they're free to make them.
Thank you, Senator Lee.
And so I just want to close by saying that if there's any confusion, this is GVB authorizing GVB to expend funds from the TAF to fund an economic impact study in collaboration with GIDA and University of Guam. They would not be completing the study. This just authorizes them to go out for an RFP, just so we're very, very clear.
Thank you. On that vote, are there any objections? There was an objection. I'm going to call for the vote. Do you have a point of information
Yes,
or
I
point
do.
of inquiry?
Madam
Please state your
Speaker,
inquiry. Or
point
your
of order, I'd just like to ask if this appropriation is materially different to the bill that was heard in the public hearing.
Senator Terlawi, I will rule based on the public hearing, based on the comments from the oversight chair of OFB that this discussion was made. I will rule it in order. It is inclusive. On the vote, is there an objection? There is an objection. If all those in favor for the Senator Regine Bisco Lee amendment signify by voting, by raising your hand. Motion passes. Senator Lee, you still have the floor. You have one more amendment. I will note for the listening audience, it is 7:00 p.m. Senator Lee, you're recognized on the amendment.
Sidus Masi, Madam Speaker, this is an amendment to page 23, lines 17 to 20, to amend section 3 of the bill to read, letter P, prescribing forms and adopting such rules and regulations as the board deems necessary for the implementation and administration of this chapter no later than 1 year, and then striking out following the board's initial meeting in place of after the effective date of this act. So this is a housekeeping amendment, Madam Speaker.
And
On
if you can include the word calendar, you have 1 calendar year.
Yes, 1 calendar year.
Thank you.
After the effective date of this act. So on page 14, subsection 8110 on rulemaking, this requires the Cannabis Control Board to promulgate rules and regulations no later than 1 year from the effective date on this act. On page 23, subsection 9107P sets the same deadline as 1 year following the board's initial meeting. So this amendment is just offered to avoid contradicting provisions within the bill by making both of those deadlines consistent. And it's just something that we found in our review of the bill. Sidus Masi.
On the amendment, are there anyone wishing to speak? If not, are there any objections? No objections? No objections. Motion carries. Senator Clint Rigel, we have exhausted, all the members have spoken on the bill. It is now your turn. You are recognized to speak on closing.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Before I close, I have some amendments to proffer.
Do you have those copies disseminated already?
I believe they've been disseminated already.
If you can read the first amendment, Senator
Yes.
Rigel, please.
So on lines 23, 27, page 28 to lines 1 to 2 of page 29, to amend the bill to read section 14.A, new section 70.44.4 is added to Title IX Guam Code annotated to read possession of cannabis by persons under 21 years of age. Any person under 21 years of age possessing cannabis shall be guilty of a petty misdemeanor and subject to a $100 fine for the first offense and a $250 fine for each subsequent possession. The violation of this section and the resulting penalties prescribed herein are in addition to other violations of public law related to cannabis possession.
On that motion, anyone wishing to speak? Senator Sabina, you are recognized.
I stand in support of this amendment, but I would like to make an amendment to the amendment, and it's currently being passed out right now.
Can the Sergeant of Arms provide me with a copy right now, please, so I can have the good senator continue speaking? No worries. Senator Parrish, please proceed on your amendment.
So thank you, Madam Speaker. In addition to the amendment, so should I just go ahead and read the whole thing? Or just the
Yes,
portions that
Just the portion that you're adding in.
Okay, so after it says, subject to $100 fine, I added, and suspension of the driver's license for 12 months for the first offense. And then I added, after the $250 fine, suspension of their driver's license for an additional 12 months for each subsequent possession. Suspension of one's driver's license may be waived by the court and replaced by 100 hours of community service for each possession if the guilty individual can demonstrate financial or personal hardship resulting from the loss of one's driving privileges. The violation of this section and the resulting penalties described herein are in addition to other violations of public law related to cannabis possession.
On Senator Parrish's amendment to the amendment, are there anyone wishing to speak? If not, are there any, Senator Sinogstein, you are recognized, and then Senator Lee.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm just curious. We added the suspension of driver's license. The individual under 21 is not driving. What are you going to suspend? And then the court can decide, okay, it's not going to be driver's license because you don't have one. It's going to be community service. If the individual under 21 happens to be just sitting down, you're going to, I'm just trying to understand that you gotta make it match. You know, if the guy's driving, take his license. Not a problem. The guy just happens to be there, guilt by association, then you're taking his license. There's got to be some sense to this madness. But
So
generally I support the intent, but I don't agree with
you object to
it.
the amendment, Senator Parrish's amendment. Yes. Senator Lee, you're recognized. Senator Sinogstein, I apologize.
Sujus Masi, Madam Speaker, I rise in support of this amendment to the amendment, and I want to thank the proffer. I agree, suspension of one's driver's license may be waived by the court and replaced with 100 hours of community service for each possession if the guilty individual can demonstrate financial or personal hardship. And I just really appreciate this addition, Sujus Masi.
Thank you. Senator Pt.2 on the proffered amendment by Senator Parrish.
Madam Speaker, I move to make an amendment on this amendment.
Yes, but we have to dispose of this amendment first, please.
Okay.
She has, if you have an amendment to her amendment, we need to work on her amendment first.
Okay, so are you then?
Yes. On Senator Sabina's amendment, are there anyone else wishing to speak? If not, would you like to close, Senator Parrish, or just ask for the vote? Would you like to close or ask for the vote? Are there any objections to Senator Sabina's amendment? There was an objection? All those in favor of Senator Parrish, please signify by raising your hand. 5, 6, 7. 2, 4, 6, 7, 8. Okay, guys, please, if you're going to vote yes, please raise your hands so we can count the vote. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Motion carries. We are still on Senator Clint Rigel's amendment. Anyone else wishing to speak on that amendment? If not, no objections. Motion carries. Senator Rigel, you still have the floor on your amendment, another amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This next amendment is to lines 3 through 11 of page 18.
Give me the amendment.
And it's a Guam excise, section 8113, excise tax on cannabis. A Guam excise tax is imposed on the sale of cannabis from a retail cannabis store. Every retail cannabis store shall pay a Guam excise tax at the rate of 15% on the dollar value of cannabis that is sold from a retail cannabis store, provided further that no such excise tax shall be levied upon cannabis intended for sale as medical cannabis.
On that motion, you don't have copies? Sergeant of Arms, can you please make sure copies are provided right now? And that the speaker has a copy, please? Senator Clint Rigel, is it on the rulemaking?
Page 18, lines 3 to 11.
We don't have it. Sergeant of Arms, can you please get the right amendment to the colleagues, please? It's not. It's 811. Does everybody have a copy? Does everybody have a copy? Senator Clint Everybody should have a copy at this time. Would you wish to speak on your amendment? Okay. Anybody else wishing to speak on this amendment? Anybody else wishing to speak on this amendment? Senator Tadegui, and then Senator Lee.
And thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I asked a question to the author of the amendment.
State your question, please.
Yeah, could you just explain it again, please?
Senator Rajel, would you like to yield?
Yes, sure, I'll yield to the question. So what this does is it just, it amends the section on the excise tax on cannabis, and it moves it from the excise tax was originally going to be assessed at the cultivation facility, and instead it moves it so that it's assessed at the retail outlet.
Senator Tadegui, does that answer your concern?
Yes, but I would also like to ask another question, Madam Speaker, if I may, and why the change?
Please ask your question.
Yeah, I'd like to
then
ask if you can, Madam Speaker, ask the previous speaker why the change.
Senator Rajel, would you like to yield?
Sure. So all it does, it just makes it easier for tracking purposes that it's actually assessed at the retail outlet, especially with regards to the medicinal card holders exemption. So that way at the retail outlet, if someone has a medicinal card, they can immediately be exempted from the tax. That sale is immediately exempted from the tax.
Thank you, Senator Rajel. Senator Tadegui, does that suffice?
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker, and I definitely support this amendment.
Thank you. Senator Regina Lee, you're recognized on the amendment.
Susan Smasi, Madam Speaker, if the author would yield, when was this amendment inserted? Was this part of our, because I'm looking at the bill and it's a little bit of a challenge to see.
Senator Rajel, would you like to yield to Senator Lee's inquiry? Okay. Okay. Senator Rigel, you're still recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. After discussing this with my colleagues, I've decided to withdraw this amendment.
On that motion, without any objection, motion carries. Are there any more amendments, Senator Rigel?
Yes.
Please proceed.
All right, lines 3 through 5 on page 29, to amend the bill to read in section 15, nothing in this act shall be construed or interpreted to amend, repeal, affect, restrict, or preempt laws pertaining to Guam Public Laws 32-237, 34-125, 34-165, and/or any other existing statute or public law relative to medical cannabis.
On that motion, on that amendment, no objection. Motion carries. Senator Rigel, you're still recognized.
Last amendment, lines 10 through 16 of page 14, amend the bill to read under rulemaking, no later than 1 year after the effective date of this act, the Cannabis Control Board shall prescribe forms and adopt such rules and regulations necessary for the implementation of this chapter and in accordance with Chapter 9 of Title 5 Guam Code Annotated. Such regulations shall not prohibit the operation of cannabis establishments, either expressly or through regulations that make their operation unreasonably impracticable. Such regulations shall include, and then that's it.
On the amendment,
This, just to explain it, Madam Speaker, this is what we are citing here is the AAA process. So it makes it clear that rules and regulations adopted must be in accordance with the AAA process.
on that amendment, are there any objections? No objections. Motion carries. Senator Rigel, you finished with your amendments? Senator Rigel, you can't. He's closing. Do you have a point of information?
Yes, Senator Terlai has a point of information in reference to one amendment we created. And I'd like Senator Terlai to speak, if possible, Madam Speaker.
Senator Terlai, state your point of information, please.
Madam Speaker, according to the Uniform Code of Substance Abuse, on Section 14 on 70.44.0, what he's saying here is that any person under the age of 21, if caught in possessing a cannabis, right, marijuana, shall be guilty of misdemeanor. On the Uniform Code of Substance Abuse that I know is that it doesn't matter what age. If you get caught in possession of marijuana for less than an ounce, that's a violation only. And to bring it up to a misdemeanor and then suspension of driver's license for 12 months, Madam Speaker, I think that is a little bit too heavy for a person that is caught with less than an ounce. An ounce is almost like maybe 1 joint or 2 joint of marijuana, and to suspend the driver's license for 12 months, I don't think it's appropriate.
I do apologize, Senator Charlahi. Yes, I knew that you were supposed to further amend that amendment, and I did not recognize you, and that is why I'm recognizing you now. So, on that amendment,
I'm just asking to reconsider this offense.
On the motion to reconsider, based on the opportunity for Senator Terlai to speak, we had to dispose of Senator Perez's amendment first before we went to him. On that motion for reconsideration, Are there any objections? Senator Paris, this is not debatable. We're going to call for the reconsideration. Are there any objections? There's an objection. Those who wish to, for the consideration, please signify by raising your hand. For the reconsideration. Motion fails. Senator Clint, you are recognized on the closing.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to first start by thanking all of my colleagues for bearing with us through this process. I know it's been a long process. We've been at this for a few days now, since last week to be exact. There's been a lot of different data that's been put out there and different studies cited, and I echo the prior speaker's sentiments, and Senator Regine Lee, who mentioned that there's bad data and there's good data. So I want to cite some of the good data that I've come across and refute some of the bad data that's being put out there. For example, crime rates have dropped in some states that have legalized it, specifically in the state of Washington. And this is according to the Journal of Economic Behavior and Organization, a peer-reviewed journal. And I'll quote from that journal. It says, quote, "We exploit the staggered legalization of recreational marijuana enacted by the adjacent states of Washington at the end of 2012 and Oregon end of 2014, combining county-level differences and spatial regression discontinuity designs. We find that the policy caused a significant reduction in rapes and property crimes on the Washington side of the border in 2013 to 2014 relative to the Oregon side and relative to the pre-legalization years." So what this study did was they not only compared rates before and after legalization, they compared it in two neighbor states. What they did was they compared Washington's crime rate after legalization to Oregon's crime rate after crime rate, which Oregon did not legalize at the same time as Washington. Washington legalized first, so they wanted to take a look at the border, counties along the border. And in counties along the border, they were able to see counties that are adjacent to each other, right next to each other. In the county where legalization occurred, that's where the crime rate dropped. In the county on the other side where legalization did not occur, the crime rate did not drop. Legalization also increased consumption of marijuana, but it reduced consumption of other drugs and both ordinary and binge alcohol drinking. Now they cite 4 possible mechanisms discussed: the direct psychotropic effects of cannabis, substitution away from violence-inducing substances, reallocation of police efforts, and reduced role of criminals in the marijuana business. That's exactly what we're doing here with this bill. In addition, youth consumption fell in Washington. According to a study published in the journal JAMA Pediatrics, the study was published in December 19th of 2018. This is just last year, just last December. This is a very recent study that shows marijuana use among teenagers in Washington state appears to have declined in the years immediately following the legalization of recreational marijuana in 2012, contradicting earlier estimates about the trend. There's been a lot of talk about GVB and tourism and how this would affect tourism. GVB has come out and said that they are concerned. They want more time to do a study. But they've had a lot of time. The medical marijuana laws were enacted 4 years ago. 5 years ago, I stand corrected. 5 years ago. They've been talking about doing a study on medicinal marijuana. I found articles on Post Guam, the Daily Post, that mentioned a group from Japan coming to Guam in 2017 that met with numerous officials asking to be allowed to participate in Guam's medical marijuana program because it's illegal in Japan. All the island's media covered this. I found articles on KOM, I found articles on PNC, I found articles in PDN. It was touted at that time as a way to boost tourism. And GVB was quoted saying they were supposed to begin studying it. They still haven't. All they did were make some phone calls. Here's a quote from that Post article, the Daily Post. "Potential Japan visitor growth. Maeda estimated that a potential 250,000 Japanese tourists would visit Guam each year if marijuana were legalized for recreation in addition to medical purposes. The JMMA also offered to advertise Guam as a medical marijuana destination. We've been talking about this forever. How come they haven't done their study? This study, I think it's a stall tactic. It's just another stall tactic. This entire process has been mired and riddled in stall tactics. Stall tactic after stall tactic after stall tactic. Frivolous amendments by people who aren't even going to vote yes on the measure. Objections to objections after objections. Protests. Those in support, and I've received numerous messages from both sides, those in support are, of course, scared to come out. They're scared to come out. They're afraid to. But I submit two pieces of evidence. The first is an online poll that was conducted by a group that's opposed to the measure. And the online poll, last I checked, had around 600 to maybe 700 signatures. A poll in support of the measure has garnered, the last time I checked, 2,985 signatures. 2,985. It's almost at 3,000 signatures. When I shared that poll on my Facebook page on Friday, there were 20 signatures. So since Friday, it's garnered 2,985 signatures since Friday morning. Well, I'm sorry, minus 20. So 2,965 signatures since Friday. Again, a lot of the proponents are afraid to come out in support of the measure. And although there has been opposition to the measure, I believe those who are in support of the measure are greater. I believe there's more. And I cited before, there are Gallup polls in the U.S. mainland that show 66%. 2/3 of Americans approve of this. 2/3. 2 out of 3 ain't bad. Similar polls conducted on Guam are showing the same thing. In fact, those Gallup polls show that the support goes across age groups and it goes across different demographics and across political beliefs. The Republican Party, I know, put out something in opposition to this measure. I respect their opinion, but I know that the entire Republican Party doesn't believe that way. And I know, especially in the U.S. mainland, the Republican Party is divided on this issue as well. There's great factions in the Republican Party, the Libertarian faction, that is in fact in full support of this type of measure. There are members of the Republican Party that think this should be something that the GOP should carry under its banner because it falls under some of the GOP beliefs of freedom of the individual, the same beliefs they talk about when they talk about gun regulation. Freedom of choice, freedom of individual choice. That's what we're offering here. Freedom of individual choice. To choose whether you want a substance like alcohol, which is responsible for over 88,000 deaths annually in the U.S., tobacco, which is even more deaths annually, or cannabis, which is 0 deaths annually. Choice, that's all we're asking for. Individual freedoms, individual liberties, civil liberties. I'll admit the opposition has come out strong in these past few days. A little bit too orchestrated, if you ask me. It didn't seem as grassroots as our movement. But I don't have any direct proof or evidence, just gut instinct. Very organized opposition. They threw everything at me, including the kitchen sink. And I know some people feel that perhaps we're rushing this, but I don't think we're rushing this. I don't think people are tired of us rushing this legislation. I think people are tired of waiting for this type of legislation. They're tired of waiting, not rushing. They're tired of waiting for medicinal cannabis to go through. I know this is a difficult decision for many to make, so I know a lot of people didn't want to make the decision. And that's why I urged my colleagues to not send it back to committee or not send it to a referendum. I did not call anyone a coward. I did not. I was calling my colleagues to action, to vote up or down on this measure. If you believe in it, vote for it. If you don't believe in it, vote no on it. Let's just vote. We were elected to lead. So I'm asking my colleagues to lead and make a decision, yes or no, on this measure. With that, Madam Speaker, I motion to place this bill in the voting file with a recommendation to pass.
On that motion to put on the voting file without any objection. There has been an objection. All those in favor of putting it into the voting file signify by raising your hand. Motion carries. Ladies and gentlemen, we still have 3 more bills on the agenda. It is 7:35 right now. We have bill number 34, 42, and 29. Bill number 30. Madam,
Madam Speaker, I believe we are now on Bill 34 on the agenda.
yes, we are,
Okay,
Vice
and I
Speaker.
think there's
and
some discussion on the floor whether some of our colleagues want to put their bill aside for next session. Can you just give us a quick recess?
I sure will.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
On that motion, we will be in recess. The 35th Guam Legislature is back from recess. Vice Speaker, Majority Leader, Senator, Vice Speaker Nelson, you're recognized.
Si Diyos Masi, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I make the motion that we move to recess till 11 a.m. tomorrow morning.
On that motion, without any objection, motion carries. See you tomorrow. Good night, everybody.